This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Constantin Morun. And I wanted to welcome you to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing today?
Oh, Phantom, thank you for having me here. I'm doing excellent. It's a Tuesday, so what can you say? I'm doing great. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm doing pretty good. We're in New England. We're in New Hampshire. We had a big windstorm yesterday
Oh,
that took
yeah.
us off the air. So we were supposed to do like 3 podcasts yesterday. We didn't get to do them, but we're back. And yeah, it's great to be doing these podcasts. We're actually at episode 1031 with this episode, tracking that on Apple Podcasts since 2016. And we do have your website up for those of you listening or watching. We have unleashthyself.com. That'll be fully clickable when we're published on all the major platforms that we're on. You can listen to us on Newsly later tonight. You can see that icon up there. If you use coupon code GHOST, you can check that out for 1 month free. That's an audio only platform with that we're a featured podcast on. What we're going to talk about today is navigating change, cultivating resilience, lessons from my life of growth, self-discovery, and spirituality. So maybe before we get into that, you can kind of give the audience like a brief story about who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Phantom, thank you for the opportunity. So essentially, I'll start from the beginning. I'll keep it quick and short and sweet. I was born in Eastern Europe, in Romania. And then when I was 17, my parents and us, the kids, moved to Canada in North America to have a chance at a better life. And in Canada is where I went and finished high school and then went on to get a degree in mathematics and the sciences, and then jumped into the corporate world like most people that want to chase the American dream, the North American dream, want to do. And essentially, by doing so, I wasn't necessarily fulfilling what was in my heart, what I thought I was meant to be doing. Now, mind you, I had and I still have amazing jobs and opportunities in the corporate world. But I have found that a lot of us do not bring or do not find joy and fulfillment in those jobs. And we can, of course, if we spend a bit of time and effort, we can actually find that and bring it to either, of course, a job in whatever field you like, or you can make it your own and become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's definitely like the story of this podcast is most of the people I talk to happen to have come to the conclusion that their 9 to 5 or what they were doing wasn't really their life purpose. They wasn't really what's in their heart. They've gone and they've become life coaches, or they have their own business, or they're an artist or an author or musician, whatever. They're creatives. And
Exactly.
I think entrepreneurs are creative. Some people don't think in that way because, oh, they're business, but it's still, you're still a creative person. You still, to me, have that artist spark. And
Yeah.
I think that's what drives people to not want to be in the cube, to not want to be in the box, is because if you have that kind of artist mindset, well, you're probably not going to be doing something that is evaluated correctly in that box, because it's kind of maybe on the bleeding edge, or it's on the bell curve, it's on the outsides of that bell curve, and they
Yes.
don't understand you. And
Yeah.
so the only way to get it out there is like to believe in what you're doing and put it into the world. And it could be a product, a wizard, or service, or whatever. It's whatever it is. But I think it's like it's that spark. And it
Yes.
sounds right. What you're unleash thyself is kind of totally my mindset as an artist myself. In my spare time.
Yes. I mean, I love everything you said there, Keith, and I would agree with you 100%. Now, here's the thing. I have realized that for some of us, let's say the corporate job or any other job that's not an entrepreneurial venture, can be the way to fulfillment and joy. But if we don't see it and find out what it is that makes us happy, that makes us feel like we're waking up and doing something that matters, then it doesn't matter what you do, be it in the entrepreneurial world, be it an artist, anything else in between. You're not really going to find the joy and satisfaction, and you're going to burn out at some point. You're going to stress out. You're going to feel anxious. All those things are going to show up in your life. And that's something I have discovered in my life. You see, I still work, let's call it a 9 to 5 job in the corporate world, where I was burnt out before. I was anxious. I was depressed. I was feeling like it wasn't for me. And then I
Mhm.
spent time uncovering what my why, what my purpose actually is. And that took a bit of time, but I uncovered it. And then I was able to bring more of my true self to my work. And now I'm happier than ever. I have been able to launch my podcast, the one I just mentioned, Unleash Thyself. I've been able to meet so many amazing people. And I've been able to also launch my coaching and mentorship program officially. Because you see, I've been someone that's been mentoring and helping people all my life, be it in math and sciences when I was younger, to coaching in soccer, or later in my life in poker, right? I played poker professionally for a while. I've always been
Oh,
drawn to helping people out after I learned it myself
a
and I've gone
teacher
through
is
it myself.
like a
Yeah,
mentor, like you're a
exactly.
coach, mentor type of mindset. And, being a producer, like I'm a musician, but I'm a producer.
Hmm.
So I like to work with other musicians and bring out like the best in them, right?
Yes,
So that's the whole point. It's like if you're a music teacher, like when you become a producer, it's like being an ultimate music teacher, where you
exactly.
take somebody who's a creative and you make them believe more in themselves, and you try to bring out the best aspects that maybe they don't treasure as much as they should. And so what you try to do is accentuate the things that make them unique and then make them believe it. And it's really like at the end of the day, they're responsible for what they created, but you kind of guided them to the answer, to the problem that maybe they didn't know they could solve. But I think it's the same kind of mindset that you probably do if you're teaching somebody math or teaching somebody
Absolutely.
how to play poker. It's the same kind of idea.
Yeah. Now, see, there's two ways that people go about teaching others in life, right? They teach and they force a method, right? Because that's what worked for them or that worked for their students, and then they want everyone to copy it. And that may work for some people. But what I found in my life, that most people don't just want to copy someone else, because we know we're all unique, right? And it's not going to work just because you copy my mentality, my approach. However, if you have a teacher, a producer like yourself, a coach or a mentor like myself, it's about inspiring and empowering you to find your own answers, to guide you along the way, to support you, to hold your hand and hold you accountable as well, and say, hey, I know you're a unique masterpiece. I know you have so much talent within you. It's time for the world to see it as well. So let's guide you to find that together.
Yeah, I think there's a spiritual part of that because a lot of creatives, we believe in this idea like the muse, right? And so
Mhm.
the muse is this old idea Victorians talked about, people even before that. But the idea that is like this universal muse, whether you're a poet or writer, an actor or musician, whatever, or a CEO, you can tap into this thing. And it's like the ability to tap into what's outside and what's inside.
Yeah,
And it's like you kind of feel the universe. And I think creatives, we can channel that. And what you can teach people to do is like to not have the limiting belief where you don't listen to that. Because what happens a lot of times with the muse is like you might have a plan, and it's always good to have a plan. But a lot of times when you're open to the muse, that spark could come in and it might deviate your plan. But if you don't believe in yourself and you don't listen, you might not go with that kind of spur of the moment, flow state thing that comes. And a
yeah,
lot of what I found is like I'm a software designer, but a lot of things come out like happy accidents. And you could have the project plan, but you got to show the managers like what we came up by accident is better than what's in the plan. And you got to have the courage to present that and say, hey, maybe we shouldn't follow the plan 100%. Maybe we should go with this. And that takes guts because sometimes people don't want to do that or they're too scared to do that.
yeah. I love where you're going with that, Phantom. I agree with you 100% that as well. What I have found in my life, that strict plan you're referring to, it's usually our expectations and need to control the outcomes. So I have a project, I have clear expectations to what that needs to look like. And what needs to happen in the case is that we put blinders on like a horse. And to your point, we miss out everything that's around us. So that muse that we were talking about. And you, of course, you may get to the result, but you may not be happy on the way there. And even when you get there, you realize you missed a couple of things. So by being open to what may come your way, while having an intention to create something beautiful, it allows you to tap into that subconscious, to tap into the conscious that's all around us, to tap into, let's say, God energy or higher self energy or the universe, whatever you believe in, and be
Mhm.
able to bring some of that knowledge in and create whatever it is that you want to create, but no longer limited by your narrow view that's only ahead. Now you can see everywhere and behind you as well at the same time.
Well, I think that's what the spiritualism is in the nature of creativity, no matter what type of spiritualism or religious aspect it is. I think that a lot of times people think that's like foo-foo. Or they think was like, oh, that's like a hippie thing. But the thing is like it's kind of like I've been in software design, and there are things that kind of come in a way that's not totally logical. Right. So you couldn't like predict that, and you're trying to predict it with your algorithm, and something comes out of nowhere. And like, hey, this is a cool thing. And it kind of is like this muse inspired thing. And whether it came from God or came from the universe, or came from whatever, it's just the fact that things like that can happen, and whether you believe in it or not, it's when you tap into that you find success, and you get, really excited when you become less narrow, what I call more expansive,
Yes.
where you can blend things and you can jump into different lanes where everybody wants to stay in the same lane. What I find there's a lot of creativity going on today that are cross lane, like they're cross genre, cross hybrid, and people who want to just stay in the lane, they miss the opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's what I'm seeing as well. I mean, in the corporate world, everywhere else I've dabbled in, right? I've been in the sciences most of my life, and when you put that narrow hat on, and when you stay in your lane, sure, you can still achieve amazing things. But when you become open-minded, when you realize that you're not alone in this universe, that you're connected to everything, to other human beings, to plants, to animals, to nature, really, then you realize that, wait a second, there's more to life than what we may have been told or what we may have seen already. And now you can open up your mind and allow, again, like you said, Phantom, to bring in these multiple channels of information and go through different lanes and find what really speaks in your heart. And that's what I was earlier in my life. I was kind of jumping from thing to thing because I didn't know what was really in my heart and what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until I stepped into, let's call it my power, that I've realized, wait a second, I can do anything I want. So let's focus on the things that bring me the most joy and fulfillment. And then that's pretty much what 2023 has been for me. An opportunity to tap into that, help many others tap into theirs, and create beautiful things together.
I think it's also interesting you talked about coming from Eastern Europe, and your questions you like to answer. You said you kind of had experience growing up in like the communist era.
Yes.
Which, everybody, in the Western mind's like, oh, that's very limiting. But I would argue like no matter what political system you're in, you can have limits within even the capitalist mindset. There are like sometimes there are narrow limitations that don't allow people to be open. So I just try to be as expansive as possible, and know there are political constructs, and some political constructs are more geared toward like oligarchy or social control, and not as much individualism. And I understand that. There's a balance to everything, and there's an understanding that not every system is perfect. And so, like, I think being critical of any system you're in leads to opportunities to refine it and make it better.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I was born in Eastern Europe and during the communist era, and I grew up with a fixed mindset, which is something I didn't realize until much later in life. And a fixed mindset is a mindset where mistakes are to be punished, to be hidden, to be kept away, right? To always aim for perfection and maybe deceive and maybe, be greedy and be corruptible and all those things that you hear about. We'll call it, the Eastern Bloc type mentality. But there are so many amazing things as well, right?
Yeah.
Now, come to North America, come to Canada, where it's very, very diverse. I've realized, like you said, it's not just the communist countries that had a fixed mindset or pushed that mentality. It was all over the place. I saw it with people from Latin America, with people from the USA, with people from Asia. Everywhere there is this push because most of us have to follow a specific plan, which is, go to school, be indoctrinated, then go to more schooling, and then likely, jump into a job. And we're not taught how to think for ourselves all the time, right? If we're lucky to have the right mentors, the right coaches, then it's a different story. But most of us have not had a good fortune. And that's where we need to wake up in a way, not necessarily to attack a system in any way, but have an open mind and say, does that make sense to me? If it doesn't make sense to me, let's challenge it and let's find something that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I think the problem a lot of times is like if you get put into this kind of, there's a problem sometimes in America where we're the best, right? We're 100%, we're superior. It's this kind of xenophobia. It's a problem because the whole point of America, it's a melting pot. We have all these immigrants coming in, and then you get people who don't actually think that's a good idea. They think it should be homogeneous. They think it should be kind of top down. There's only certain people who should be in charge. And so then there's like it's a little bit of hypocrisy. You're saying one thing, but you're doing something else.
Yeah.
Like if you go to certain parts of like America, you have these mindsets that like, the South, like the Confederacy, like that they had a mindset that's very limiting. And there's still people that have that mindset and they're trying to run things and trying to control things. And so it's not very clear cut. It's not like 100% this or 100% that. There's degrees. And what you have to understand from a perspective is that like you have to be willing to challenge the pillars of any system and see, does that actually make sense for me? Does that make sense for where I am, for what I'm trying to do? And if then because what happens, you grow up with like self-limiting beliefs. You believe something that said, well, I'm not good enough. Only the people who are in the the actual canon are the best. Like Shakespeare is the only real writer. I can never match Shakespeare. I can never match Orson Welles as a film director. I can never match Bill Gates as a entrepreneur. So why should I even do it? Because I'm never going to match him. So it's like, okay, well, if you have that, then you're never even going to start.
Exactly. Great point there, right? And when we're talking about challenging these limiting beliefs and the indoctrination, I think you've maybe come up with, it's not about being against something just because it's different and just because it looks different and feels different than you, but it's having an open mind and saying, okay, I'm open to all ideas, but I will run with the ones that make the most sense to me, the ones that maybe are backed up by, for some people it's science, for other people it's social proof, for other people it could be anecdotal proof, whatever the case might be for you, whatever floats your boat. Just have an open mind, be open to challenge beliefs, because keep in mind, those beliefs were put in place by other human beings at likely a time that's not right now, which means that most of them are outdated, and it gives you a chance to change.
Yeah, because I mean, we live in an age of AI. We live in an age of like unlimited possibilities in biology and science. Like there's all kinds of things happening that were like science fiction, like bionics. Well, that was science fiction. It's not science fiction. There's like cybernetics. That's not science fiction. There's a lot of stuff that was a Harlan Ellison or Isaac Asimov or Ben Bova. I'm a sci-fi guy. That's actually getting to happen. I mean, the communicator that we saw on Star Trek is our cell phone. It actually exists. So the things that we thought were impossible are now like, oh, well, that's yeah, that just is. And so the ability for human beings to just exponentially develop along with our science have challenges, because the problem I have also is just because the technology can do something, well, is that moral that it does it? Because sometimes it gets ahead of the curve. We have capabilities now that can go beyond our laws, beyond our morality. And so then you have to really start to come at things like from a holistic or Socratic method and ask the question, like why, how, what, when, does it make sense? Is it just, is it not? You have to ask questions and not just accept something because, oh, that's what it is.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, with artificial intelligence, we're seeing it right now, right? Is it ethical? Is it following the right approaches? How biased is it, right? I mean, we train it on, let's say, artistic content, right? Images, songs, videos, whatever, you name it. And then we're going to have it create things based on that. Well, how ethical is that? How can we put guards in place so that at least the people that have supported the system can get credit? And supported could be without their choice, right? Because it crawls the internet.
It's a big thing as an artist, because it kind of like there's an issue that was very much a parallel in our electronic music and hip hop. back in the 80s. People sampled before they had digital rights management and licensing. So people had tools. And again, it was ahead of the curve. You had these samplers that could just sample anything. And then people would put things together and then they wouldn't pay the artist that wrote the sample. And then later, what happened is the legal system caught up with it. And now you have to clear the sample. So you can't just sample something and put it out as a record without paying the person who originally owns the master. I believe the same thing's going to happen with AI because AI is doing that. And people have already started to sue some of the companies that have AI, people who have copyrights, people who have patents, people who've noticed that it's actually using their material. They've gone into GPT and they say, hey, this thing's using my material and acting like it's new. It's not new. It's something I did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's going to catch up. As we know, of course, it takes time for anything legal wise to catch up, and it will, like everything else. And until it catches up, it's up to us, those that work with this type of software, like myself and others, to actually bring as many ethics and morals into it as possible, and eliminate as many biases as possible, and eliminate any of the injustices that we've seen. Like you gave a great example with the sampling in the past. I mean, we have lots of lessons from our history. We just tend to not pay attention and then repeat the same mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of history that shows, like, if you own the master, there's so many artists today that are independent because they signed contracts. They gave up 80% of their rights to the company because they didn't understand the contract. Because a lot of artists are 17, 18, 16 when they get picked up. They just get the money thrown at them and they don't look at the contract. The contract's like 100 pages long, and so of course they didn't look at it. And so they lose their rights. And later, when they get in their 20s, they say, "Oh, I need to take over. I need to get ahead of this and get my rights back." And so I think it's the lesson that a lot of artists have learned since the 50s to now, that you really have to pay attention to contracts. You really, even if you don't want to, you have to understand how things work. And if you want to like own what you've created,
Yes.
then you have to take an interest in, like, if you're in the software, you have to have patents, you have to copyright things, you have to patent things. You just put something out there as freeware, then somebody takes it and gets $1 billion off of your idea. It's like, well, maybe I shouldn't have done it for free. It's like,
Exactly.
what did you want to do? I was like, I understand you want to do it for free, but now you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done it.
Yeah. And the good news is nowadays with the internet, and of course, even with ChatGPT, as you gave an example earlier, we have access to people that know more than us, right? There was a time when I try to do everything, like, learn how to do the legal stuff, learn how to do this, and that. And that's not one of my geniuses. That's not what I'm best at. So if you have the opportunity to bring someone in your corner that actually is an expert in the legality of things, for example, bring them in, pay them a few $100 or whatever it takes, have them review that and be in your corner, because no matter how much you study, if that's not your expertise, you may miss things out. And that's a hard lesson I've learned in life, is find people that will be in your corner. If you pay them, or their mentors or coaches or friends, that's fine. It's whatever works for you. But find those people. Don't try to do everything yourself, because you're going to be, jack of all trades, a master of none, and then you rob yourself and the world of the genius you have inside, because that genius should be activated, as close to 100% as possible. But if we do everything, then it's not, right. It's maybe 5%, 10%.
Yeah, you have to kind of realize what you don't know. Like if I'm not the legal expert, I might not be the booker, I might not be the agent. You try to be your own agent, try to be your own booker, you're probably not going to get a lot of gigs. Right. So it's like if a lot of times you have to know, like, you don't want to get ripped off, but like, if you don't know SEO, find somebody who's a legitimate SEO. Right. If you don't know how to do AI marketing, then find somebody that can help you learn how to do AI marketing, or take a course. If you want to get better at public speaking, you find a mentor that can kind of bring you out of your shell and teach you the ropes of public speaking and being able to, like, shine and thrive with that audience.
Yeah.
So there's so many things that you can find from the library to the net that you could beef up on a lot of YouTubes without paying anybody.
Exactly.
And then find the thing that resonates, and then find the people who are in the top who have done the TED Talks or something to say, hey, or in that kind of range, and say, oh, now I know who I need to talk to. Now I know who I want my mentor to be. but I did a little research before I just jumped in.
Exactly. I love that. And then you touched on two important parts there, right? You either pay someone or do it for free to learn how to do it yourself if that's a skill you want to develop. And most people may sometimes do not enough of it or too much, right? There's a fine balance where, like, if I want to be a public speaker, which I am, if I want to be a coach and mentor, which I am, if I want to be a podcaster, those are areas where I want to pay others to teach me, to be my coaches, to be my mentors. Now, do I need to be a web designer and build my website? Probably not. If that's something I like to do, of course, then let me go on YouTube, let me learn, then let me pay someone to help me out to learn more. So find what it is that you actually like doing, and that's where you want to spend time and upskill yourself and have as much of a growth mindset as possible. And those other areas, you may not have the budget right now to pay, let's say, an accountant to really run your numbers and to give you a budget. You may not have all the money to hire the best lawyers, but you can start somewhere to learn a bit yourself, do some of it, and then, of course, bring people in your corner as your finances allow or as you befriend certain people.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of times that I run into people. Like I ran into this is the story I had with another person who wanted to be a podcaster, and they're like, "Oh, I really want to get into it." And for 5 years, they've been saying they want to get into it, and this is like the age of the podcast, right? And the problem is they're like, "Well, I don't have a mic, I don't have the camera, I don't have this." So they said, "Well, I can't do it till I have all these things." And I said, "I started with just doing it on a phone." With no nice mic or anything. And I just started doing it, talking to people. And of course, like the first 10 episodes probably weren't that good, right? But after a while, I started getting comfortable, started learning the ropes, started getting opportunities to talk to people. Like you kind of have to start. But if you refuse to, you keep on saying you have to have all these conditions before you start. It's like the artist that's sitting in his loft with 100 paintings and people come over and say, "This is awesome." And they say, "Well, it's not good enough to go in the gallery." And people are like, "Looks like it's good enough to me."
Yes. Well, you touched on an important thing that, that's usually what people call procrastination and hesitation as well. As a combination there. And sometimes there's a bit of overwhelm that trickles in. And what happens, it's usually there's a fear of a couple of things. There could be a fear of failure. So that's why you find excuses to not start. Oh, I don't have the right equipment. Don't have the right things. Could be a fear of the unknown, right? Which is the biggest fear most humans have. It's like, I don't know what happens if I'm going to put this out there. There's also be a fear of success, which is something that people don't think about very often, which is the idea that if you become successful, which of course, if you start putting stuff out, you could become successful, and likely you will down the line. But if you become successful, you may start losing people in your life. Your life may change in ways that you don't expect, which means that you have a fear of success. You're like, oh, I don't really know if I want to go down that path. And this all happens at your subconscious mind level, right? At your nervous system. You don't really realize it until it's too late. That's why a lot of us struggle with procrastination, hesitation, overwhelm, and all of these things I just mentioned. And it's important for us to dig into those and see how we can come out of those limiting beliefs and overcome those challenges, because I can guarantee you anyone that overcomes things like procrastination, hesitation, stress, overwhelm will be 10x farther along than anyone else that they know in life that has still struggling with those same issues.
It's also is like this idea of like once you start something, it's like a lesson learned, and you can't be afraid to fail. Like if you're an artist, if like a lot of times the things you do are like steps on the ladder, and you could look at it as well. That's a failure. Like if I'm as a songwriter, I've got like hundreds of songs in the can, songs that ended up being progressions to the thing that I ended up putting out. But it's like to me, it's like the raw material that gives me, it's not a failure just because it wasn't commercially successful. I might have tried something new and then I got better at it. And then I got to the point where it launched me in a different direction. And so just because it's not perfect, isn't a reason not to do it. A lot of times the happy accident, is the thing that drives all creativity. And you can't always predict what it's going to be. And a lot of times, the first people who see that happy accident might have a negative reaction. A lot of famous art is like the first reaction is like, "Oh, that's no good," because it wasn't in the canon, right? It was different than the canon, so it can't be good.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean it's not good. It just means that people didn't expect what you were doing. And then eventually it finds an audience. And so people get so scared of that initial feedback that they get scared to go forward. And I think that that's why I try to prevent with people I work with is like, kind of buck up a little bit to that. The haters are going to say something, and you got to get past that and know that if you feel in your heart that that's the right thing to do, then go with it.
Yeah. I love that what you said there. And the haters, funny enough, sometimes it's just our own limiting beliefs, our own learned behaviors from younger years, right? And we allow that to come to us. And you mentioned this as well, right? Your haters come up in your mind, and you're like, oh, this is not good enough. We can't put this out. We can't do this. We have to find ways to procrastinate, which is done automatically. You don't even realize it. That's why it's important to not just say, oh, you just gotta, embrace failure. You gotta embrace mistakes and learn from them. Sure, you should. But most people don't know how to do it. And it always starts back with your psychology, like the thoughts you have about yourself, about the people around you, and the world at large. And what I have found is that through my mentors and neuropsychology, which is something I'm studying as a passion of mine, is that literally your thoughts, the only thing you have control over, your thoughts, is what leads to your feelings, which then leads to your actions, and then leads to what you have in life. So if I want better things in my life, it doesn't matter if it's a better relationship, if it's more wealth, more abundance in, let's say, financial health, anywhere across, it has to start with a better action. And how can I have better actions if my feelings are out of place? And if the feelings are the issue, then of course I have to look at the thoughts that generate those feelings. So if I have a thought that I'm not good enough, right, and my work is not good enough, that's going to generate a feeling of not being good enough, of being fearful, of something that's not positive, which results in a negative action. And inaction, which is what we were just talking about, is also an action, right? You just chose to do nothing. That's an action.
Yeah.
And then, of course, what are the results that come out of it? Nothing positive for you. So it's got to start with the thoughts that we have. And the thoughts that we have are influenced by your environment. So the people around you, the situations around you, like what you watch on television, on social media, what you allow in your sphere. And you have almost no control around what they do or what they say. You have control around what you allow in and what those thoughts are. And when you start changing the thoughts is when your life will start changing for the better, because to your point, Phantom, you can now go back and say, well, this is good enough. The haters, I don't care about them because it's about me. And I have a good thought and a good feeling about what I'm putting out. And it may not be for everyone, but I will find my tribe and I will find the people that will resonate with this.
Yeah, because that's what the problem is. A lot of times, like in social media, we get the thing where it's like, oh, I got to get 1 million views. I got to get 10,000 views. I got to get 1,000 likes. I got to what? And what an example I have is like I had a particular thing I did on Instagram, and I only got maybe like 30 views, right? But one of the people that viewed it was a Grammy award-winning producer. And then I got an opportunity for them to come on the podcast. So all the people who say the only way that you're productive is to have 1 million views don't take into account that sometimes it's the quality of the people that did view it, right? Or like, so if you put something out there, just because you didn't get 1 million views doesn't mean that a person doesn't actually get it. I heard there was a famous musician that got picked up by a producer, and they had very little likes or any kind of views on their thing, but a producer saw the clip and said, I dig this, and then boom, went to him. So if the person said, well, I shouldn't do clips anymore because I'm only getting like 10 views, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only thing. And so I think that's the problem, is we're so qualitative about the metrics that is always the number. It's not actually thinking about certain situations where, like, it's not always, it's the quality of the people, or the interest of a few people could be actually very dynamic. It could be the right person that actually gets to see it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can have 1 million views and you never get anything.
No, I love that. I love that, because you know what? That was me when I started my podcast. As much as I tried, I was like, oh no, I'm not going to care much about the downloads, about the views, about how the reels do. And of course, at the beginning, I was all over that. And then when I stopped caring about it, and I went back to my mission, which is to inspire and empower people on this beautiful journey, that's when the numbers started to go up. Everything became better because I was focusing on the qualitative stuff, not just the quantitative. And in my field, right, like you said, I've gotten clients out of content I put out, but I've also been able to impact the lives of people that I will never get to meet in person or ever work with. And if I put a piece of content out and someone avoids committing suicide that night because of some inspirational content, wow, that's worth more than
That's
any
a win.
millions
Yeah,
of
that's
viewers,
a big
right?
win. Yeah, you can't measure that monetarily. There's some things that are not about money. And
Yes.
some things are about just the aesthetic. Like if you get or just about the like you just you just click with somebody. You got on the same frequency, and then suddenly that inspired them to go do a piece. Like one time I had an artist, they got like they saw something I did, and then they went and wrote a piece, and they told me like they didn't tell me immediately, they told me like months later. And then, the piece they did ended up doing better than anything I did, but they were inspired by my piece. So to me, I felt really cool
Yeah.
as an artist that actually, it's not all about me. It's like if I inspire somebody to do something and they get big because they take some aspect of what I do and they dug it and they kind of incorporated it into their work, that's just cool. That's cool. It's like it's just putting things out there to inspire people. And
Yeah.
if you inspire people to go and be positive and do something creative, they create something
Mhm.
and it impacts people. That's the mission, is to create something that means something to somebody, right? Whether you're a writer or an artist or entrepreneur, that you're doing something that makes somebody like say, well, yeah, this is worth getting up in the morning and checking this out.
You touch on a big, big, big point, that having your own mission there and following through on it. And that's really what has me sitting here or standing here in front of you and having this beautiful conversation. Is I got very clear what my mission, my why, my purpose, whatever you want to call it, is. And then I did a quick inventory of what it shows up in my life, realized it doesn't show up much. And then I made an effort to bring it as much as possible in my life, be it in my professional life, be it in my podcasts, in conversations like this, everywhere. So for me, it's about inspiring and empowering people. Others could have different missions, but bring more of that, right? If you are creating songs that are meant to make people smile, for example, and laugh, whatever the case might be, then that's what you want to do every single time. It doesn't matter if it's a reel, if it's an actual song, if you're writing something, bring more of what your mission, your purpose is into everything that you do. And then everything else will follow. The numbers, the money, everything will just come.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just to let people know that like you don't have to just clone what's in the top 50.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people just want to clone what's already been successful. It's kind of like AI just repeating something that was already done. To me, like as a podcaster, I started my podcast talking to emerging and independent artists that had unique voices
Mhm.
because I wanted to bring their stories to the people and get people to listen to people that aren't in the top 50, that maybe are just, in the underground. Because it's like it's to me, it's boring to just listen to people who are already popular.
Yes.
Right. I rather listen to somebody that nobody ever heard. And I listen to people like every week, find people, and I still interview musicians that I want to give them a shot because I think that's how you discover. To me, as an artist, is like I don't need to hear what's already somebody that's already successful. I already know about them. It's like I need to know about the next thing because that's where things happen. Like in the underground, in music, or in the places that you don't hear things in the popular zone, that's where a lot of the advancements happen. That's where people are actually pushing the envelope. And so, and I think it's the same thing like, with people who are, coming up with new technologies. Like it's a
Mhm.
lot of times it's in the underground. The hackers might have it first, or it'd be like people, the college kids got it somewhere in some corner of the net. And it's like that's where the stuff is happening. Before it gets to Microsoft and Apple and Google and all those people, it's the underground guys that are doing it. And then like, oh yeah, well that's what's cool.
And I love that message and how you started, because that's exactly how I started my podcast. It was about bringing voices to the masses that weren't necessarily given a chance to express their voice. They've done amazing things in life. They have new ways of tackling health challenges, mental health challenges, you name it. And they need a place to share their stories. And it's very similar to exactly what you just said. They are the ones that are creating new ways, methodologies. They've lived it themselves, and they help so many others. So why not bring their voice up? And I love the similarity between our messages and how we go about bringing those to the world.
Yeah, because it's like a mission just to get people excited because the more people that realize that every human being has a creative spark and everybody could be, you know, that entrepreneur if they believe in themselves. It's really not about like all the other things that were imprinted on you. It's as if you can kind of rise and pull that energy and get that frequency and link to other people. It's like the law of attraction.
Mhm.
You start spinning at the right frequency with what you're doing, it will actually draw other people to you. And you know,
Exactly.
it sounds like foo-foo or whatever, but it is kind of what happens, you
Oh
know?
yeah, 100%. I mean, Phantom, you're absolutely right. I mean, again, I come from the sciences, right? I thought that was woo woo and all the way out there, and then I started aligning myself. Let's call it. I had my spiritual awakening, and I started working on myself. I stopped trying to fix and change everyone else. I started to go inwards, doing the self discovery we mentioned at the beginning. And then guess what? As my frequency vibration elevated, let's say as I elevated myself, if you don't believe in the woo stuff, what happens? Of course, more doors will open up, and people that are already at a higher level because they've been working on themselves or they've been on a different path, they start coming into your life, right? And those people that don't want to come along with you for the ride, that maybe were keeping you down in the past, well, they'll
Yeah,
exit your life
yeah,
as
they're
well.
not in your frequency anymore. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you just they say the law of attraction is like you put your stuff out there, you get pulled into different social groups. You get pulled into like, you know, you get different markets. If you like that's why it's like kind of limiting. Like, well, yeah, I'm in New Hampshire. If I only thought that I was like going to just present to the state of New Hampshire,
Mhm.
I'm only going to affect the state of New Hampshire. But if I put it out there on the wide web into the world, I get access to all kinds of areas. I've talked to people like every country, you
Yeah.
know, is out there because it's like I wasn't just trying to reach the NPR audience on public radio in the state of New Hampshire. It's like, well, I could have done that 20 years ago, and then maybe that was good enough, but that's not what is happening now.
Yeah. It's leveraging all the tools you have access to, right? That's why I say right now, with the internet, with AI, with technology like you and I are using right now to have a beautiful conversation, there is no excuse to not find your tribe. Meaning that I hear a lot of people, and I've been one of those, by the way, they say, you know what, I don't really have good friends in anywhere in my personal life. I can't find them locally. Well, what stops you from going online, joining and finding groups of like-minded individuals? Start connecting with people. Literally, nothing is stopping you. Sure, in-person connections are always going to be better. But if you don't have access to those, if those are not fulfilling, then find them online. And that's what I did. And it's like you said, you know, and I connect to people across the entire world, Australia, Asia, Africa, you name it. I have friends and
Yeah,
some I call family all over the place.
yeah. I mean, I have a producer in Japan I talk to. I've talked to people in like a group of twins in South Africa that I've had on the show. I've had multiple times people in Norway, Netherlands, Australia, you know, Germany, like everywhere. And not just music, like, you know, people who are executives, people who are authors, you know, life coaches, therapists. And it's like what I found with the podcast, also the benefit to me after like 1,000 episodes is like a master class with that person I'm talking to. Like the person I'm talking to is like an expert in where their mindset is, right? So I get to hear that. And that's unique from any other human being. So every time it's like I've had over 1,000 hours of listening to the mindsets of over 1,000 individual human beings. And you know, anytime you get 1,000 hours worth of oral history coming into your head, it helps you. It expands your mind. This just doing this is expanding my mind like a college course, like a
Yeah.
master's degree.
I would argue even more than a college course. I'll be honest. I mean, I went to university, I did engineering first, and did mathematics. And the 80 or so conversations I've had with people on my show, and then about 50 where I went on someone else's show, they've trumped a lot of the
Stuff you
conversations I
learn.
had in college or learnings because, like you said, my mind expanded so much. I went in with an open mind and a willingness to have a beautiful conversation. And what I came out with was friendships, mentors, coaches, people that are now in my corner and have helped
Yeah.
elevate me to what I am today.
It's like your Rolodex of like all these like virtual friends. Like
Yes.
so, and the way I mean, I've had people on the show multiple times. I've had people come back, people, you know, send me stuff, give me opportunities that I never asked for. It's just like, oh, I was thinking of Phantom. I'm thinking of Keith. He's like, oh, he could do this, or I want to work with him on this, or I've introduced other people to, had people work together because they saw somebody on the podcast. They went and reached out to them and said, I think the law of attraction pulled us together. It's what Phantom said, and then boom, they started working on something. Well, that's the whole idea, is to have a collective of people who are willing to think in like an expansive way and put their mind wares out there, and not just talk about like what they're doing, but connect with other people that maybe have something they can kind of build on each other.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's the whole idea of being in the public square, is to not just dictate to the public square, but to integrate ideas in the public square and then synthesize maybe new things.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I love that we talk about the law of attraction, manifestation, and those, some people can think of those as woo terms, but if you actually look from let's call it a scientific point of view or more analytical point of view, what does it mean? You're taking actions and things are starting to happen in your life. You're taking actions and now you get to meet new people and whatnot. But where people go wrong and see like, oh, the law of attraction doesn't work, manifestation doesn't work, is when they just, let's call it pray or expect the things will just come into their life, but they don't take any action towards it, or they do the same behaviors they did before and expect different results. And what you talked about, Phantom, that's so beautiful, is that you're taking action. You're having these conversations. You're going outside of your comfort zone and finding the people to bring on your show. You're doing all these things. Well, that's how you create this magnetism, this law of attraction, this manifestation to come into your life, because you're not passive, you're active.
Yeah, because the one thing that was interesting when this whole thing happened, I went to video 2 years ago, and then I started using like the booking service I'm using. And initially, I didn't see a lot of musicians. I said, well, what can I do with that? I'm not seeing a lot. I was mostly a musician podcast. But in the last 2 years, I changed. And they said, well, how can you do that? Because you got to stay in your lane. And here's me not staying in my lane. I say, I think people are creative no matter who they are.
Yes.
If I tie that creative things, I can talk to a CEO. I can talk to an author. I can talk to a film director. I can talk to a therapist. I can talk to a doctor. I can talk to anybody. And I can throw the ideas like you're a human being and what you're doing, you're bringing your creative nature, and the idea of the muse applies to everybody. Yeah. And so if I tie those things and say it's cross lane, muse applies to the CEO, applies to the CFO, applies to the programmer, applies to the artist, applies to the mystic. It doesn't matter who they are. It applies to everybody. Yeah. And so if you put it in that mindset, then you have a very expansive group of people you can talk to, where you can see I only talk to women, or only talk to men, or only talk to this. Then if you say, well, no, you don't put that limitation, right? Open it up. Then suddenly the world has all these opportunities where before you say, well, I'm only a musician podcaster.
Yeah.
And then exactly. You're not.
Beautifully said, right? Because it was going back to the limitations that we kept discussing, right? I was limiting myself in the past. I was like, I'm not creative. Why should I be doing this, right? I cannot draw, I cannot sing to save my life, so I'm not creative. And then, to your point from earlier, I realized the way creativity actually shows up in so many different ways. Now I create solo episodes for my podcast. I interview people. I have conversations with. I go on other shows. I mean, that's creativity. I create reels. I create shorts. That's creativity. It's just a different way to express it. And when we're open to whatever possibility out there, that's when we could truly understand what our strengths lie and find where it is that drives us.
Yeah, I think that this lesson that people can learn is they put one foot in front of the other and just start, show up. The first thing to do is you show up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, like if you start something then if you don't immediately have success, then you give up. Right. Yeah. So, if the rule in podcasts, people usually give up after 12 episodes if it doesn't hit some goal that they had. Right. Yeah. And so it's only if they don't get the numbers there, they're done. They're out. But where if I did that when I first started, I wouldn't be doing it.
I mean, that's beautifully said, because you know what, I've stumbled upon them myself. I started podcasting my first episode went up in May, so about 7 months ago now, and I started recording in March, and I knew going in that people, like you said, struggle, and by episode even 4 or 5 they give up. I actually had 30 episodes recorded before I even went live. So even if I felt like, oh, the numbers are getting to me, my mentality is not strong enough yet, and I'm still working on it, I had enough episodes to last me. And now, I'm
Yeah.
releasing episode like 65 in 7 months, and I have another 30 or so recorded. I've been on 50 shows plus by now. So consistency is key. And it's not even about the numbers, because my numbers grew significantly since the beginning, but it's about what you learn and what I've learned as a host. And Keith, I mean, me 7 months ago when I started this and me now, wow, night and day difference. I'm a better speaker. I'm a better listener. I ask better questions. I tell better stories, and I've learned so much. I mean, it's such a big difference. You have to start, like we talked about, right? Take the action, and then bring some consistency to it, right? Find whatever it is that you want to be consistent with, like it's once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, and stick with it, and then you'll see the results.
What I found is like I initially tried to do like edited podcast, but I went with I'm kind of a jazz musician. I'm a fusion kind of guy or experimental, so I like to just do stuff kind of like live
Yeah.
in the flow state. So I kind of went with the live, and after time, I took my jazz kind of predilection to be like a fusion jazz player, and to do that with the podcast. So then I don't have to focus on editing out the trying to make it perfect. Just let it be what it is. And
Yes.
when you do that, when I found from that, and I found I ended up learning how to be a podcast host by just getting comfortable in my skin and doing it. And it's
Mhm.
kind of like practicing a 3-point shot. If you're a basketball player, you practice, you get that 1,000 hours in, then it's muscle memory. It just
Exactly.
becomes intuitive how you talk to people. Is you become a good communicator because you do it. And if you do it, you'll get better at it. And that's kind of like it's as simple as that. The more you do it, the better
It is.
you get at it.
It is. And it's funny because, I mean, I do a lot of speaking and talking in the corporate world, and I used to do some in the past with my poker coaching. I recorded videos, and I thought I was good, right? And I do my videos, I have my recordings, and I start editing podcasts. By editing, meaning, kind of like you, try to edit things out. And I realized, wow, I say, a lot. What's going on? I was already decent enough to not have a lot of ums and ahs in there, but I said, like maybe, 100 times per episode, which is significant. So I could edit it out, but I left it in. And like you said, I became aware of this and I started working on it. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, now I'm going to be conscious about the fact that this is something that's perhaps reducing the quality of my shows and the quality of me being on another show. So I'm going to actively work on it. And that's what I did. And now, do I use, Of course, it slips in every now and then. It has its purpose, it has its place, but it's no longer taking over the entire the entire script, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of being aware. It's kind of have that situational awareness. So if you have situational awareness, like if you've been a live podcaster and you learn, like one of the core things is listening. Like listen to the guest and have them. You don't get so caught up in your script or the
Yes.
questions that if you hear something that wasn't in your script or wasn't on your plan, that you can kind of flow state, go in a moment and kind of turn on a dime and go down that rabbit hole. Because sometimes it works. It works. What I find is just being in the present is useful. And it
100.
creates like what people think is like it feels honest, it feels authentic. And so if you have that as your motif, is like we're gonna do an authentic, honest kind of conversation that feels like it's not an infomercial, then I'm gonna get a certain audience that's gonna dig that.
Absolutely, 100%. And I love that you touched on the awareness space. I honestly say awareness is half the battle. Anything you want to change in your life, you won't be able to change until you become aware it's a problem. Now, how did I become aware that I wasn't speaking the way I wanted to speak or listening the way I wanted to listen? I literally just went back and re-listened to my episodes. Now, some of us may not have a podcaster, so we can't do that. But guess what? If you work in the corporate world, you may have recorded meetings you participated in. Go back and, as cringe as it might be, listen to how you talk. If you want to improve how you talk, that's first become aware of what some of the shortcomings are, and then you can go on YouTube, find people that can help you, read a book if you want, or anything else. So that applies to any skill in life. And you and I talked about this plenty tonight, but it starts with awareness, right? Know what you want to change, take action, and be consistent. And those three will take you anywhere you want in life.
It's also like synthesizing the moments of your life. Like I was an Uber driver for 5 years. And one of the things that came out of Uber driving is like, in order to get the 5-star rating, you had to talk to your customer, right? So if you learned how to have that taxi cab conversation, kind of like the barbershop conversation, you get better, right? So before I even did the podcast, I've been doing the Uber to buy instruments as a musician. I wanted to be able to buy more synthesizers and guitars. So I do Uber on the side. And the benefit was I got more comfortable with people.
Yes.
Because I was driving all these people and I had to talk to them to the airport and to wherever they were going. And it became more natural. And then when I took that experience and segged it into the podcast. But that's how you can take this and then seg it into a business meeting. You can take it and apply it to your at a party. It's like you learn how to actually not be on the wall, but actually engage in the conversation because now you know how to do it.
Exactly. And you touched on something important there, right? You said you weren't necessarily comfortable at the beginning doing all of that. And that's what it appears in most of our lives, right? We're not comfortable doing certain things, and then we allow our negative thoughts or limitations to hold us back from trying those new things, learning those new skills that we want. If I'm someone that wants to speak on stages, well, I better be good at speaking with individuals first, with small crowds, and then with the bigger crowds, and make them feel heard and listened to, and inspire them and empower them at the same time. But I cannot just one day wake up and be on the stage and be the best person ever because I don't have the required skills because I was too afraid to learn them. And this can be applied to anything else in life. Do the things that seem hard, and then you'll reap the rewards at the end of it.
And don't beat yourself up if you don't go 0 to 100, like on the first thing. Like the first public speaking episode is probably not going to be where you want to be, a year later. A year later, you're going to be looking at that and said, wow, how did they even go on stage? Well, that's, you had to go on stage to get on stage.
Exactly. I mean, that you touched on two important things. That's the growth mindset piece, right? Learn from every experience. Know that, of course, you're not going to be perfect ever, right? But you can do your best and you can learn from it. So learn. Know that you're not going to be you're not going to be the best day one, but you can get there eventually. And at the same time, there's another part that people often overlook that I like to talk about and encourage anyone I work with is to celebrate. So like you said, look back and be like, wow, I actually did that. Like most people wouldn't be doing that. Or, me from 5 years ago wouldn't be doing that. So let's celebrate. Let's celebrate the small successes and, of course, the big ones, because those big ones come easy, right? You celebrate your birthday every year, most of us, right? But how about celebrate the fact that, if you've been fighting depression like I have in the past, right? Celebrate the fact that you woke up, made your bed, went for a walk, and maybe went to the gym, right? Like those are things you can celebrate every single day or every time you do it. And that's going to train your mind and your subconscious mind and, of course, your nervous system to look for the positives in your life.
Yeah, it's very important to take the small wins and, accept them. Because a lot of times people are so down on themselves and they're not, celebrating their wins. And if a lot of therapists will tell you, and artists, we keep journals, we keep diaries, and they become like the basis of a lot of our work. And it's that kind of looking glass assessment in the mirror and going back and looking at it, right? And so if you purposely keep a journal and mark your small little wins, not just mark the things that failed, because a lot of people will do the diary and they'll talk all about the negative.
Yes.
You got to start including the wins and the positives and the aspirations and the goals. You start doing affirmations and start thinking in that way, you're going to be a lot better off.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. 100%. And if you think about affirmations, for example, again, a topic that some would consider woo-woo, affirmations, what are they? You're talking to yourself in the positive. You're talking to yourself about things you want to accomplish as if you've already accomplished them, right? I am, this magnificent singer, whatever the case might be. What you're really doing is you're telling your brain what to look for. And if it doesn't necessarily have proof just yet, it will look to make proof for you. Because your brain, your conscious mind, if you look at the science, it cannot distinguish between what's real and what's not. So if on the flip side it's true too, if you keep telling yourself you're stupid, then you may not be, right? Because nobody's really truly stupid. But if you keep repeating that, you're going to believe it and you're going to see proof of it, which means that the flip side again is true. Look for the magnificence in you, and then you're going to make it a reality.
It's definitely, that's the goal. The goal, I think, is to, like you said, if we go back to your web page, because we're at the end of the show, but unleashthyself.com, that in itself, that idea, unleash thyself, that's an awesome term. And it's cool you got that for your URL. And we do want, encourage people who listen to the show to click the URLs of the guests, because they can get a deeper dive of what we've been talking about and connect with our guest, and dive into more of what we've been talking about today. We hit the end of the show today, but I want people to make sure they connect with you and check that. It's going to be fully clickable when we're published. And I want to thank you again for being a guest on the Family Liquid Coach podcast. Very enlightening, cool discussion. Always goes in ways I never expect, but that's the way we like to go.
Thank you so much for the beautiful conversation. And thank you for the audience for tuning in. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Take care.